So, Jess, I'm so happy to be with you today. Thank you for hopping on to the podcast. Um,
Thanks for having me.
of course. So, I have a zillion and one questions for you because, for the listeners' benefit, we have known each other for probably like 15 years. I don't know, something like a little less than 15
Something like
years.
that. Yeah.
Um, and I had the pleasure of being your life plan guide, I think back in like 2017 or something.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm excited because I have had the pleasure of getting to know you as a friend and then getting to share this experience with you where I learned so much about the woman that you are. And I have to say, um, Jessica's one of those people that I like could say a billion wonderful things about, like, and that's always been true. I think just your heart and care and love for other people has always been really evident to me as a friend. But walking with you through this process to understand just the depth of your love for other people and your commitment to I think there's this little bit of language that came out of your life plan about your heart to preserve the good. And that's what I think of when I think of you, of like someone who, against all odds, is someone who will preserve the good in life. You are a woman that I look to for that. So thank you for hopping on today.
Thanks.
Um, so, Jess, one thing that we should say to everyone about you is that you are a mom, a mother of many.
Yep.
How many kids? Tell
Many
us a
kids.
little bit about like your family. Let us know where you're located, all that fun stuff.
Yeah. So I am a mother to four children. Their ages are 2, 4, 6, and 8. Um, they're all about to have a birthday. So soon they'll be 3, 5, 7, 9. But they're pretty
Wow.
close together. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. And I live with them and my husband in Park Slope in Brooklyn. Um, yeah, we live in an apartment, a pretty typical New York City kind of setup. Um,
Yeah. Which I
I've
think
lived here
should,
about 15 years. Yeah.
well, that should say that she's also a superhero because for those who have not lived in New York, you just said, I have 4 children under the age of like 8 who are living in New York City in an apartment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Sometimes I really wish we had one of those. We had a backyard just for like those Ninja Warrior things, and I could just send everyone outside and be like, just go play on the zip line thing and just get out of here. But I can't send them to the street. So
Yeah.
here we are
That's okay.
together.
Yes. And outside of kind of the mom life that you've got going, you're married. I know your hubby very well, who is a pastor, right, in Brooklyn. And then on top of that, you also have done work as a registered nurse. So that's like a big part of your life as well, kind of being a frontline worker for us.
Yeah. I had always been interested in medicine, and I think I was just a little lazy the first time around in college. So I didn't pursue that immediately. But after moving to New York and working in a very corporate finance environment, I just couldn't get away from that. And in fact, I remember I had not, maybe even never been to Brooklyn, and found myself going to a Doctors Without Borders setup in Prospect Park on a weekend. And I just thought, I have to figure out how I can get my hands in this. And they were like, you have to have some kind of medical training and be licensed, or you can come and live with us for like 3 years and push paper. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll go back to school. So I ended up doing that. And yeah, and I'm a registered nurse. I had the chance to work in a hospital here in Brooklyn in the spring. I worked for about 6 months um, at Methodist Hospital here, and that was very rewarding. It was a little scary, but it was mostly just really, really beautiful. I worked with people from all over the world, all ages, languages, skin color. It was just, I feel like that experience was the most kingdom representative environment that I have been in a long time. And so,
Wow.
yeah, it felt like a privilege for me to get to be there. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for doing that. I feel
Yeah.
like everyone who has been involved in medical care in any capacity. I know my husband's a physician, he's a psychiatrist, so it often feels like he's a little bit spoiled as a physician. But he has had to deal with the emotional trauma that folks
Yeah.
have gone through as a result of COVID. But
Yeah.
we're just so grateful for the ways in which you've shown up and put yourself at risk for the greater good. So thank you so much. And I'm excited actually to hear that, because when we did your life plan, at that point, you were kind of grappling with like, do I even go back to nursing? Because you'd finished to nursing school, you'd kind of gotten a little bit of a start. And then it was like, oh, wait, no, I'm going to spend a little bit more time in kind of this motherhood space. Not that you leave motherhood, but that was going to be your primary focus. Yeah. And the idea and the kind of freedom in some ways that comes with being able to like get out of the house when you don't have a little with you. You didn't have that at the time. So we were debating that. And so then later I was like, she's in the hospital, she's working, like what's happening? So anyway, tell us a little bit about why you decided to originally do your life plan. Like what was going on? What kind of made you interested in this sort of process?
So yes, it was May 2017 that we sat down with a big bag of kettle corn and did life
Yes.
plan.
That is the secret. Don't tell people. That's the secret to life planning.
Okay. My husband and I had been through a professionally and personally kind of, it's really sad transition. Like the details of it aren't really important because I don't want, anyone to, I don't want to smear anybody, but it had been someone that Josh had worked with for a long time, sort of pulling away from this thing that we had worked for a long time. And it created a lot of unknowns for us professionally, personally. It was kind of like, so what are we doing here? What are we going to do next? And I think I have in different seasons been maybe more involved with church than others. Like when I went back to nursing school, I really didn't have friends. I was just focused on studying. I wasn't very involved. And then other times I've had more margin to give and just, been able to see, okay, I have something to offer here. And when this happened, I felt sort of secondary to what was going on. But I thought, okay, well, so what am I doing here? And why do I want to live in New York? And what do I want to do now? If this thing is sort of starting back from zero, I have the chance to do anything I want. Do I want to keep doing this? Do I want to keep giving my life to the city and serving it in this capacity? Or do I want to bury my head in the sand and move away? And so I did a series of things. We sought a counselor that we saw separately and together, which I've done that at different times in my life. And absolutely, if you think you maybe might want to do that, that's a yes. That means yes, you should do it. Talk to somebody. I also attended an Enneagram workshop with Ian Crone that was put on by a sister church of ours in Tribeca. And that was...
What's your Enneagram type, by the way?
Could you guess? I am a 1 with a 2 wing.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And I felt like I think Christians can be really hung up on that right now. There was a trend with Strengthsfinders that was very trendy. But the thing that was the most helpful with that, besides knowing about myself, is the guy putting it on said, when you learn about all these numbers, it should give you empathy for others and to see them as Christ did, that Christ embodied every number, and then he made all of us different. And instead of being annoyed with each other, you understand now why someone is doing something. Maybe it's driven by an anxiety or a fear. And instead of being aggravated, you can love that person better and speak into their life, or maybe say, oh, that's really not who you are, Chanel. Like, I can see that this isn't, this is something, that a pattern that's changed in you. Like, can we chat about it? So that was super helpful. And then also a life plan, which my husband had done, and he felt, he had a great experience. I didn't know anyone who had done it and didn't like it, or felt like it wasn't helpful. And I was a little hesitant because I wasn't working like in a professional capacity. I thought, this is kind of a waste because I'm just a mom and I'm just at home. But I couldn't have been more wrong about that. It was super helpful for me as a person, as someone who has worked and will work again. Yeah, I think back to it a lot. In fact, I have my purpose statement pinned at the top of my notes in my phone.
That's so good.
Yeah, I don't know how much more I could talk about it a lot.
Well, no, I think I was just going to say, I think
experience.
one thing that you said that was really helpful there is like, I think a lot of people have that feeling of, I'm not working in a stereotypical space, and or I'm not even sure what my next career step is. And so it feels like I shouldn't go through this kind of intensive process without a clear idea of like what I'm trying to do next. Mm-hmm. And I love that you actually went through it, because you got the real benefit, which is the value of life planning is when you don't know what's next. When you're kind of in that place where you're like, I don't know, what I really need is to get a lot of perspective on who I am, what I'm about, what I'm passionate about, what I care about, and how I'm wired. And then once you understand all that information, it actually creates a filter for you so that you can better understand what to do next. So I love that. As far as what your experience was, I know you mentioned the keeping your life purpose statement penned, which for folks that don't know, that's kind of, I always say that's the piece de resistance of like life planning, is that we come up with this, one line statement that you can use. Do you mind if I share what your life purpose statement is?
Go for it.
So let me read it off, because I love this. Maybe I should have you do it, but I'll take the honor on this one. We came up with, I exist to be a helper who loves like family, anticipates needs, creates order, and encourages health. Does that still feel true for you even now?
Absolutely. I think at that time too, since I wasn't working in a professional capacity, you and I talked, that I get a lot of texts or phone calls, sometimes late at night, just asking, medical questions or, different things relating to family life. And I feel like my training as a nurse, and then also learning these things about myself, has given me sort of an empowerment to love other people better. I can take, like Brene Brown says, everyone's doing the best they can with the tools that they have. Okay, so then a life plan is like that huge craftsman toolbox, like the biggest one that you can get at Home Depot. It's a life plan just gives you so many things like that to pull back from when you're interacting with others, when you're learning about yourself, when you're trying to make decisions, like that life gating process, or just so many things, just how to the replenishment cycle. I just felt like I reach back to those things all the time. And yeah, the purpose statement definitely helps me think. We had talked previously, just it's easy to be able to do a lot of different things, but what is the thing, or what are the things that I should really be focusing on, that I am really good at, and that maybe other things are accomplished as a result of me sort of staying focused on this thing that I'm really meant to be living out of. So
Mhm.
that, I mean, the purpose statement is definitely true. And I remember you saying that it wouldn't be super enlightening, but I might even share it with someone and they'd be like, yeah, of course. Of course that's who you are. And that was definitely true for me. It was, giving language to it, but it wasn't like this earth-shattering thing. It was just like absolutely more like just an alignment of, yes, that is sort of like a shaking and nodding of your head. Yes, that is who you are.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that deep resonance. I mean, that's what we're always aiming for. Instead of this, I think that's the life coaching approach, right? It's like, let's set
mm,
some like huge ambition for your life and let's try to like go after this target that's outside of who you are. And I
mm,
think part of which is my heart is like helping women become women of real consequence and not just chasing after significance. Like this is what the world
mm,
says is like a great life. It looks like this, but
yeah,
actually turning inward and going, no, this is who God created me to be. And when we land on a real strong life purpose statement, it's something that should feel like, oh, it's like an old sweater you're putting on. Like,
yeah,
yeah, that really fits me. And
yeah.
I feel comfortable and I can move in this. And it
Mm,
actually gives some constraint to my life in a way that feels freeing. Because I go, oh yeah, that's when I feel like I'm operating in my sweet spot when I'm doing that thing. So
yeah,
I love that that still feels true for you.
for
Um,
sure.
well, tell us a little bit more. I have a bunch of questions for you, but um, one of the things that I'm really curious about is just your heart for moms and family. And I want to get into this because I feel like 2020 has been the hardest year for so many of us. And I think I should say that like there have been harder times in history, right?
Sure.
But I think 2020 was so hard because I don't know if there's ever been a year that presented so much possibility. Like I live in the life plan space, like 2020, clear vision. Like I'm about to do this thing. Like people were riding high of what was
Yeah,
possible for 2020. And then it was like, no, this is the lowest low that you will probably experience. Um,
yeah,
so that was really hard. And we're still in it. It's 2021. And um, for many of us, life feels much like it did last March or last April. So I'm curious for you, just how have you seen this kind of COVID experience affecting women and in particular moms and families? Because I know that's one of the spaces that you're really passionate about.
yeah. Um, I so I was just talking to my husband the other day about, just feeling so exhausted. And I feel like every winter, which in New York, we're out of winter now, technically, although it was really cold yesterday. Every winter I sort of have like, I'm not okay, and this is horrible, and living here. It's just seasonal affective stuff. But one year he did very gently say, you say this every winter. And I'm like, no, I don't. He said, yes, you do. It's just
Mm.
hard. And so last year, I very similarly had gone on this great trip and sort of began some new rhythms. My youngest child was about to turn 2. I was sort of moving out of that baby phase and really coming into just some sweet spot, like spiritually and taking care of myself. And then was like a man running off a cliff. I had a birthday and then it was lockdown like 2 days later. So
Whew.
I think I sort of just turned in with my family and was like, this is a really sweet chance for us to really pray for our city. We had the Book of Common Prayer that we pulled out every morning, and just had this like really sweet little routine. And honestly, and you can maybe judge if you want, but that just didn't last. It was I cried through it every time, just feeling so afraid, for our physical safety and like what would happen in our city. And then, I had all these little people to sort of shepherd through this really scary thing. And so
Mm.
fast forward a few months ago, the Times had done a piece on about mothers, and like mothers are not okay in the pandemic, and we're like the biggest affected group, women losing their jobs and having to return home to take care of children. And I was kind of like, this is great, except this began months ago. The day that lockdown started, this was an issue for families, particularly for mothers. And so I think it's been easy for me to feel like self-pity, but actually the reality is just that society has kind of failed us. And I think it's easy to feel overlooked because parenting, mothering can feel like a thankless job in regular time.
Mm.
And I've actually been reading this book called Liturgy of the Ordinary, and I'm only halfway
Shut
through it.
up.
Really?
I'm
Have you
reading
read
it
it?
too. We're the
It's
same person,
so
everyone.
good.
We're both
It's
Enneagram ones.
so good.
It's so good. It's so good.
It's so good. And so before I started reading that, I read Domestic Monastery. I don't know if you've read that.
No.
Highly, highly, highly recommend it. It was like a balm to my soul. And I'll touch on that in a second. But the line from Liturgy of the Ordinary was that everybody wants a revolution, but nobody wants to do the dishes. And I was like, it's me. It's me. Because I think the kids go to bed and I'm alone with my thoughts and I'm like, this isn't what I want to be doing. I'm having a crisis of who I am. I'm not accomplishing any of my goals, or I'm not able to actually go get a job at the hospital because I can't get a caregiver for my kids because of this virus. And but then actually there is holy work to be done in my home of sweeping up crumbs and doing dishes and kissing boo-boos and helping people learn how to read, which I'm very not skilled at doing, but I've been having to do for the last several months. And so I just think I've had to be reminded again through these other voices, through books. And, even when I expressed to you, I feel like I'm not really doing anything. I'm just a mom. And you were kind of quick to just be like, oh no, we're not just a mom. Parents are building the foundation of society, in our homes. We're raising people, but it's not something that's very esteemed by our society. Just like we've seen education isn't really valued in America. We've kind of not really done much to see our kids succeed in school through the pandemic. That's kind of been illuminating. And so, yeah, I have a huge heart for parents who just feel like they're drowning and just taking on more responsibility, more loss, and trying to shield your children from some of that pain, like where it's appropriate on top of that. And there's no guidebook. There's no one alive right now who parented through the Spanish flu pandemic, which was totally different because there was no internet and there was
Right.
all of this other stuff that we're dealing with. And so, yeah, I feel it's easy for me to feel lost in the shuffle. And I'm glad that the Times published that piece, but it did feel to me personally like this is too little too late. We've been struggling for months.
Yes.
Women letting go of their careers, or all these hilarious photos you see of like a mom on Zoom and there's like a baby down here and there's a kid lighting the kitchen on fire. And
yes.
that's just one snip of how how difficult day in the life of a working from home parent, or just a parent keeping their people alive.
Yeah.
What you're kind of dealing with in this time in history. So
yeah. No, thank you for saying that. I mean, I feel so similarly. I get asked all the time. If I were to sum up, probably the number one question that women ask me is always like, how do you do it all? And I'm like, I'm drowning. I don't know how you think, what does this look like to you? Which is, I think, an unfortunate part of our social media. I try to do my best to occasionally show the hard stuff too, but when you're in the midst of the hard stuff, you're like, I'm going through it. I don't have time to Instagram it. The house is on fire. You know what I mean? I don't put a filter. I need a fire extinguisher. And so I think that it's so unfortunate because we don't often discuss the hardship and the challenge that it really is, but it's so real. And even as a woman who, I feel very, very blessed in that I technically kind of own my own business, or I'm an entrepreneur, and I can adjust my schedule the way that I want. So that's allowed a lot of flexibility, which I know that other women can't do. You can't just decide, yeah, I'm just going to do this nursing thing whenever I feel like it, from my upstairs bedroom or whatever. It's I guess I've got to go into the hospital and like make this happen. And I have to live according to other people's rhythms. And so I felt very spoiled, but I feel like I'm drowning, that description. I keep saying I'm writing a book, and in my book, I use this analogy about feeling like I'm drowning in, or I guess metaphor of I'm drowning in shallow water, of this feeling of like, I just can't quite keep my head above water. And I know that it's possible in some form, but it just feels so impossible day to day. And I wonder, I thank you for sharing those resources like Liturgy of the Ordinary. And what was the other book that you mentioned?
It's called Domestic Monastery by Ronald Rolheiser.
Oh,
and it
good.
just really speaks to, I think I feel a lot of shame as a Christian parent I feel like no one talks about how your spiritual life gets upended when you have kids. And you may not have time to sit down and read your Bible or practice silence and solitude.
Yeah.
That's two things that are literally non-existent in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Life, when the bell for prayer rings, no matter what you are doing, you stop that thing to go and pray. And similarly, in domestic life, when a child cries out or needs something, you stop what you're doing to help your child, to take care of them. And it was just very soothing to me to be like, oh, this is spiritual, this is holy work that I'm doing at home. And it's maybe not seen as valuable and building by society or by secular society, but for me, knowing who I am and who Jesus is to me, it is so important. It's the most important work. So I don't always believe that, especially when I'm trying to get my child to not destroy my robot vacuum or whatever the thing is. But I've reached back to those things a few times, and it's been a helpful reminder.
Yeah. And I think that's part of imparting this kind of holy view or layer to our daily and ordinary activities is so critical, because one, it's real, like that exists. It's actually not like a manufactured, like, wouldn't it be nice if we thought of these things in a holy way? There is no real like sacred secular split there, right? So I love writers who help to break that down for us. But I also love just this idea that you have a purpose and that there's meaning that supersedes any one particular sphere of our life. So I know with like life planning, one of the things we talk about is how your calling, your purpose is not just for a career. And I think we've seen that a lot this year. I think those folks who have struggled the most in terms of an identity crisis, right? And that kind of loss of self have been the folks who found their identity in one sphere that was no longer available to them. So I think, I've certainly heard from a lot of women, like last summer, I was the busiest I've ever been. And which is insane to me, because it was like, I thought, oh no, my business is going to fall apart. It's COVID. And instead it was like all of these women who had lost their jobs or were in a place where they were being asked to do more than they've ever had to do before. And they just felt like, this isn't who I am. Like, I feel like I don't know who I am anymore. And I get that. And I have such empathy and compassion for it, because I've been there too. And every woman I work with has been there in some form. But it also was really heartbreaking to me, because I thought, wow, this is the lie of our culture, is that you are what you do. You are your job.
Yeah.
So when you lose your job, then who are you? Well, you're a nobody. Congratulations, or I am my friend group, or I am my church community. And so when you can't go meet with your church anymore, now it's like you have this crisis of faith and crisis of self, because those things have never been, you've never really defined them on your own terms, outside of these external realities. so you haven't been able to pivot as well. And I think that's one thing that I've seen you do really beautifully. And I know it's hard. So I don't say that like you've done this beautifully and like it's easy for her, right? I think it's beautiful. It's both. It's beautiful and hard. But I've seen you go from, hey, I'm going to focus on what it means to be a mom of a tiny infant and what that means for my level of engagement and how I can live out who I am in this world. And then I've seen you at like, I don't really have like a tiny, tiny baby anymore. And so now I have more freedom and flexibility to go like meet up with girls and go have like a nice dinner or whatever it is and demonstrate my purpose there. And then I've seen you go like, hey, I can work and I can like live out my purpose here.
Yeah.
And so that ability to know yourself and to pivot is really critical, along with seeing kind of the holy nature of everything that you do. So I'm curious where you are now. Like, what does it feel like? What are some of the questions that you're just asking in your life now? I mean, you've done the life plan, you've gone through these other processes, you're reading, we're in the midst of still this crazy pandemic. But what feels like for you, just like Jessica Staten's asking this about life?
Yeah, I'm so I feel on it, like very honestly, I feel worn slick. I feel so tired, and at times it feels like the thought of doing anything else feels absolutely impossible. But I had always said, okay, when my youngest child is a toddler, at some point, I'll try to go back to work in a more full-time capacity or in a different capacity. And that would have been maybe last year.
Right.
And now that, things are changing, shifting, it could be possible for me to go back to work in a hospital more full time if we're able to get childcare. And depending on what happens with school, we just found out our kids are going to get to go back to school 5 days a week starting next week. So for anyone listening who thinks New York City
Ooh.
is dead or shut down, hold my beer because it's not. Still a great place to live. Yeah, I think for me the thing that holds me back is fear, and just fear of the unknown. Like, what will it look like? I don't When I worked in the spring, people were constantly like, you have 4 kids, you have 4 children. And it's sometimes like, yeah, I do. And I'm here and my hair is washed. But sometimes it's like, why would you do that? And so I think sometimes it's seen as an obstacle. My family is like, or a burden. And I think for me, it's more just the fear of how do I continue to take care of them well, make sure that their physical needs are met while I'm away. And then how do I continue to give of myself to them when I've been working and giving maybe the best of myself at that time to my patients. So I think probably the number one thing would just be fear and ability to execute. Going back to work and still caring for my kids. But at the same time, when I was working in the spring, it was so life-giving that even though it was physically tiring, it was building other things in me. And my kids would talk about it. They, all the time asking me questions about work. And so, yeah, I think it's more of just, for me, sort of really unfurling my fists and going for it. I think so much of life is just that. It's just doing the next right step. And where I work, what area I work in, all of that gets sorted out when it gets sorted out. It's just me sort of taking the next steps to do it and to not be afraid. So
Yes.
I think for me, it's more just like logistics Olympics of having a big family in this time. And and then also just the fear of stepping out.
Yeah, that is so real. And I think a lot of women are in that space of what is the next thing for me to do? And how do I balance, because I think we are just living in a new reality. Like all of our, I feel like it's like we had these hammers or something in our toolbox before that we used to always use, and that's like totally useless. Like we're actually dealing with like a screw now. It's not a nail. So you're like, crap, I got to go find a screwdriver. Like what's happening? And
Yeah.
I think we're all in that space of trying to renegotiate what life looks like and what's possible. And I think it's okay to be a little afraid in that. We have the same, my kid's not going back to school, but we have in our household, chronic illness is a part of our lives. And so we've had so much fear around COVID because it's just truly meant life and death. I know it's that unknown for everybody, but we're like, oh, we've had almost died from the flu. So this is not something to be messed with. And we have like a nanny that's coming into our house like next week. And I think we're so excited about that little loosening of the reins, but also what does this mean? And how do we, that fear of just opening up to something new and balancing it all. One of the things that you said that I thought was really hopeful, and I hope that the women listening caught it, is this idea of just taking that like next step for the one next right thing. We talk a lot about living in your limits. And I think that our limits are so beautiful. They can be viewed as these negative things that hold us back. Like, oh my goodness, I have 4 kids in the city, and that's a burden and a barrier to me living the life that God has for me. Or God has given me 4 kids in the city to help rein me in and help direct my steps so that I do the very thing that He would like for me to do. And when we start to like love those limits and we cherish them and we actually see them as beautiful guideposts helping us make the best decisions for our life, like that changes everything. So I'm excited to see like what you'll do, because you are a phenomenal mom. Like this is, I always wish that you had some sort of like large platform. This is my vision for Jess, is that one day she will have like a book and a website and television show or something, because you have personally helped me know what it means to be a good mom, like to actually see, and a good mom for me, like not just like, here's what a good mom looks like. It's giving me such peace about this is what motherhood looks like for you. And I think you've modeled it so beautifully. So anyway, I just see you already doing that well. And now you get to adjust and kind of rework it a little bit and see what it looks like for you to do that while also being a nurse and kind of grappling with all the other things of post or mid-COVID life. I don't even know what we call this season now.
I don't know.
But that's fantastic. Well, okay, one last thing I'll ask.
Okay.
So many things I didn't talk to you about. I wanted to ask you about like women in ministry. Maybe like one day we'll talk again, but
oh man.
Okay, wait, we have to go this before we wrap up. We have to go there.
Okay.
One thing, what would you say to women in ministry? Because, oh gosh, I don't even know how to best phrase this question because we need another 3 hours to talk about it. So you are a pastor's wife, and I say that with air quotes here because that's kind of the cultural title that we give. What do you think about that title, for one? What does that mean to you? And kind of what are some of your thoughts of what you see happening with women in ministry when it comes to them living out their purpose and calling?
So I think culturally, or I would say historically, a pastor's wife is almost like you're like a side piece. Sadly, like that's kind of what I think of.
Yes, I'm dying. That's funny.
Yeah, you're dying. I can see you're dying. I never have thought of myself that way. And part of it is probably because I moved to New York. Josh and I were not engaged. We got engaged and got married here after he had already been working as a pastor. So I had a sort of separate identity before in our church before we got married. And so I have always felt more like I am doing my own thing, and now we're sort of joined together, and I can still be me, without just like melting into what Josh is doing. And I also had a role in our church, before we were married. I think, and also backing up, also having read some things, like there's a book literally called The Pastor's Wife, and I had to put it down. I mean, the woman who wrote it, I think, is a lovely woman, but it's so stereotypical, and I'm not really a mousy, I'm kind of sassy, I'm kind of
Yeah.
salty, and but I'm also not very extroverted, I'm not energized by people. So I often get the, oh, she's a snob. And that means just basically I'm guarded, I'm to myself because I've been hurt by people before. So for
Mm.
someone to assign me, that I'm a snob or I'm in a clique is a totally unfair assignment. And so when I think of a pastor's wife, my hope is that it just means a person who is married to a spiritual leader who can be themselves. And I think
Mm.
there are some great examples of women like that. Kathy Keller, Jerry Scazzaro, who has a book that's no longer in print, but it's called I Quit. And
Wow.
it's her story of just literally being like, I'm not coming to church with you anymore. This is not working for me. She totally pulled back and reevaluated and is in a very healthy space with that. But I think, yeah, she just knew who she was, and she was able to say, I have to pull back from what other people are saying about me or what they expect of me. And this is actually who I am. And um, as far as in ministry, I think a lot of that work has to do with men, learning and listening and opening their eyes. I can think of this specific time. This is unrelated to ministry, but I was jet skiing with a friend in college, and we were borrowing some jet skis that there was like a 2-cycle thing where you have to have gas and oil every time. We
Mm.
were having a hard time getting the oil in because we didn't have a funnel. And I don't even remember my solution for the problem, but I had somehow figured out how we would do that. And he was kind of a dummy, but he was like, he kind of muttered under his breath, like, that's why you need a woman around. And I've thought back to that little phrase a bunch of times. Like, we had a problem and he wasn't able to solve it on his own. He needed a different perspective to come in and help find a solution. And it wasn't like a profound thing that we were doing, but I just feel like a lot of times in life, and especially in ministry, having other perspectives and other voices is essential. And if you don't have that, you're not, like, what are you even doing? You need voices of women, of older people, of younger people, of different backgrounds, different skin colors. Maybe people speak different languages from different parts of the world. If you're not rounded out, you're just doing this. And so,
Yeah.
as far as ministry, I think some of my greatest successes have been when, um, especially other leaders, but especially men, are able to say, we need your input here. We need to hear from you because, we see what we see and we've made this plan, but we know that you probably have a different perspective and that you have a lot to give. And that's not to cop out and say it's all on the guys, but I think it's easy for women, for us to sort of demean our point of view and go, oh, well, it's, they've kind of got it. They've got it sorted out. And maybe they do, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't improve on it or you couldn't prophetically speak into the thing that's happening. So I just know it's been easy for me to do that to myself, sort of make my position or my part low, when really I am imago Dei. I have something to say too. And my part is really valuable. And so when I have someone else on the outside, a friend or my husband or somebody say, yeah, your voice is really valuable. Like, even you doing this with me today, you saying to me, no, what you have to say is important. This is your perspective. This is your lived experience. You have something to give. Um, and I would just say that that's absolutely essential for every pastor's wife. as well as women in any capacity in ministry. You have something to say, you have something to give.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I have oh gosh, so many chills. I feel like I needed to hear that because I certainly had years of being a woman in ministry. And I think the best relationships I had were with men, much like your husband, who was, my boss at one point. But I think men who are really great at just saying, I just need you in the room, right?
Yeah.
Like, I just value your perspective, what you have to add here. There's an organization here in Atlanta that just asked me to be on the board. And the guy who runs the organization said, I just like the way that you think about things. Like, can you just come? And I was
Yeah.
like, I don't really know what I'm supposed to add. And he's like, just think through this with us. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that is such a great way to elevate women, because I do think others can count us out. And I think we often count ourselves out. We don't value that our perspective is something unique and beautiful and necessary for the flourishing of whatever thing that we're participating in at the time. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. Okay,
Yeah.
last thing we'll say and we'll wrap up is
Okay.
any organization. I mean, we talk a lot about in Life Plan, your life purpose living at the intersection of your talents, your heart, and your influence. And so we talked a little bit about these things. For your heart, tell me a little bit about an organization or cause that you care about, that you just want to remind folks that they might either donate to, be aware of, or invest in, research about. What would you say? What do you care about?
I would say a couple of things. Definitely your church, the place that you call home. Most likely they are doing a lot of on the ground things where you live, and it's important, I think, to have some buy-in. And just speaking from a staff perspective, it's not really about the money. It just means that what you spend your money on shows a little bit where your heart is. So if you spend a lot of money on traveling, you love to travel, and that's great. But also, if you do give to your church, I think it just says something about a thing that you care about, that you're invested there. I just think that is important, and it doesn't often get talked about, sometimes for fear of feeling like the church is trying to take. But churches don't exist if people don't participate, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and financially. That's just a part of it. So I would say just your local church, wherever you're plugged in. And then another thing I very much care about is maternal health. And right now we're seeing a lot of crisis in maternal health for women of color. And there are so many organizations doing great work with that. Every Mother Counts is run by Christy Turlington, and she does a lot of great work and just a lot of awareness. I think it's something that I didn't even really know that much about. It's not something that was talked about much in nursing school for me. But as I became a mother, I was also a runner at one time. And that's how I started to see about her organization. They do a lot of races and stuff like that to raise money. But I would just say, again, I like to keep it local. The big things are really great too, but if you are aware of an initiative in your area that's helping to support mothers, whether it's a clinic or a group of physicians who are doing work for free, that's the kind of thing that, again, I mentioned it, but that's the basis of society. Is like, whoever the children are, they're the next people. Like, they're the people who are going to be making laws for us, taking care of us, building things for us. If we don't show that we care about them and invest and build into that, sort of, what are we doing? So I care a lot about moms and families and anything close to you that is supporting specifically mothers and parents. I would say that's the thing to be giving to.
Yes. Yes.
And
I
your
love that.
time, not just your money, you're also your time or your talent. It doesn't have to be just your money. They need a lot of things. So if you're an attorney, maybe you could donate your time as an attorney. I find that there are lots of ways. I minored in nonprofit management the first time. So nonprofits, they need all kinds of things. They need money, but they also need other things as well. So
Yes. Yes. Well, in light of that and in response to it, what can I give? So, one thing I will say is that I am a life planner helping women get clarity in their life purpose. So, if you are a mom, I cannot donate 2 days of my time for a full life plan, but I would love to donate an hour life plan kickstart session. So, if you are a mom out there who is just feeling lost, like you are drowning, and you just need someone to talk to for an hour to kind of help you get your head above the water a little bit, shoot me an email, Chanel@lifeplan.nyc, and we'll try to get you on the schedule. So I have 3 spots for that I will give away to different women, different moms out there. Jess, thank you so much for your time. I absolutely just adore you. So grateful. And I just wish you all the best. Thanks so much.
thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that you became a life planner, whatever the thing was that kicked you into that. I'm just super grateful for your voice in my life and your perspective. And yeah, your gentle guiding me through that process was very, very meaningful for me.
Oh, you're so welcome.